I've closed big deals. I'm very proud of some of the deals I closed, but I've also been put on a pit. Systems and technology is not really the constraint. Creativity is. But guess what? It was just slop. Just to assume that an agent could do that is pretty insane. 60% of our deals have gone from stage 1 to close lost. Why? What is happening there? When your project fails or if it becomes too much spaghetti code, who's going to fix it? I've kind of lost some faith in depersonalization. Like the one thing I've been looking for a long time is
Hey, welcome back to the Stacked GTM podcast. I'm here. This is Andy Mowat. I'm here with my co host, Noah Marks from GTM Council. We, on these episodes, love going deep on specific topics that are impacting GTM driven by AI. And so this series is all about going deep on the GTM engineer role. And today we've got Joe Lehr from Primary Ventures. I've known Joe for a while now. He's been both a RevOps roll up your sleeves type of guy, and now he's actually sitting at a venture firm at Primary Ventures, working with a lot of their portcos. Joe, welcome.
thank you guys. Excited to be here.
I've got a good sense for where Primary plays and size wise, but maybe can you just kind of explain the sizes of companies that you typically work with, and when do you get called in?
Yeah, for sure. So it really varies. So we're primarily like a Steve-based fund, but we've been around for 11 years. So, some of those investments in Fund 1 are now Series D and plus. And I'm working across folks that are pre-seed all the way through to the top. So it's really a nice mix, good challenge with context switching. But a little bit about Primary. We're about 60 people, 8 check writers across specialized domains, various verticals. We just recently closed our Fund 5 at $625 million. So we're investing a lot of different folks to be working with across the firm. Like for context, our thesis is invest early and just do whatever we can to get people, the founders, the companies through to Series A. And a big focus is giving the resources to actually work with those portcos. So you could think of me as like a fractional go-to-market engineer, a fractional technical RevOps lead, and I just jump in, whether it's with the pre-seed companies or just joining a 10-person plus RevOps team. So it really just depends on the size and what they're looking to implement, and it's in an awesome way all over the place.
Maybe we start with kind of because I figure your bread and butter is like that seed and A. You're going into a lot of these companies before they actually have hired RevOps, and they're probably just moving from founder sale to building out an org, which is a really fun time because they haven't made any mistakes yet. So you're not unwinding a lot of stuff. But what would be your prescription for, call it like a recently raised Series A company? Like, what do they need to get in place to be able
Yeah.
to execute on the GTM side, Joe?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Primarily, I think one of the first things we lean into is like mapping the universe, and that's really understanding like who are your target companies and your target contacts are. I come from the customer success world, but still sales is the number one spot, it's the number one focus, especially when you're, early stage. So whatever we could do to start building that motion out in a way that could be scaled. So when we talk about mapping universe, it's really thinking through who are your ideal accounts and who are the right contacts that fit those accounts. So there's a lot of work that could go into that. We try to have a crawl, walk, run approach with everything we do. But once we're able to get that universe mapped out, we start really leaning into like, what are those signals at the account level? And there's different tools that we're using to scrape those signals. But what are those thoughtful signals that are not commoditized data? We're not talking about Zoom info. We're not talking about, just the basic scrapes. We lean into understanding the business, working with the team to get that data in addition to the map universe. And we start looking to say, hey, here are your large account list. How can we target folks with thoughtful outreach, thoughtful content? The signals play a big piece. And I'd say, the way things have moved with AI, it systems and technology is not really the constraint, creativity is. So it's helping people understand like, hey, there's a tool like parallel.ai that'd say like, that's part of my toolkit I've been pushing for a long time, Andy. Last time we spoke, I mentioned it to you. Parallel is the tool behind or under Clay's Claygen that powers it. That does some impressive stuff at scale for pennies. So being able to leverage a tool like that streamlines the data collection piece. But to be able to actually think through like what those questions are, those signals that we want to enrich, personalize, update the CRM with, that takes some time and some like, a couple meetings to get through. But once we have that, it's really off to the races with building like a shifting from like founder led to like a more of a scalable, somewhat automated approach with some, obviously with some human in the loop.
I love that. You said systems are not the constraint, but oftentimes, a lot of the time, at that stage, I get the asks of like, "Hey, what do I need?" Right? And I always say you need a really good data foundation that's able to ingest all the different information, right? So the call data, the product data, everything like that. Like, what would be an ideal system? And again, you get the luxury of going in looking at lots of companies, but what do you recommend people put in at that like
Yeah.
early stage?
I'll start high level. Like I do
Yeah.
think a CRM is necessary, even for speaking with folks that are pre-seed and even being part of like our forward deployment program where we're like looking to win the investment. Sometimes myself and my team gets brought in. We look to push people to start building that foundation because everyone wants to run the agentic workflows. Everyone wants to do all this crazy stuff, but without the data, like what good is it? Right. Or if it's commoditized data, like what good? That's great. Your team size is 65 people, but like that's not helpful. So we look to really structure out what's the object schema looks like to power their go-to-market motion. And typically, like we start with depending on what they're looking to do, depending on how they're looking to scale up their sales team and the sales motion, it could be a tool like HubSpot, that's just really traditional CRM, but it enables you to leverage custom objects. You can start mapping out the relationships that could ultimately be ported over to a database like Supabase that could really scale it out. Or we look to bring in, less of the traditional CRM, but maybe more of a zero or a light field that are more agentic focused, where, there's a trade off between like abstraction and like level of nuance you want to get into. But the high level is that we look to get this data in a foundational place that matches the design of like who they're selling to. So do we need custom objects? Do we need to do some deep research to get additional details in? But from there, that's like, I'd say the most challenging piece to start with. And that's where we lean into mapping a universe. Then the rest is enrichment, the systems that live off of that. But yeah.
I would agree with you that everybody wants to run and build agents before they've actually built the right data foundation, which I always want to shoot myself. How do you? I'll ask one more, and then I want to kick it over to Noah. But I get constantly talking to these like Series A companies of, "Hey, we've Claude coded up a GTM engineer spec. We know we need some AI in our GTM." And they haven't bothered they don't act they aren't even looking at the profiles of RevOps people, and they all come back to me, like, 2 months later, and they're like, we talked to a lot of those people. What we really need is, like, a director who really understands a director of RevOps who understands AI." And so, like, maybe my question to you is this, which is what is that first hire that you would make, in for one of these companies that call it, like, late seed, early A type of range?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, RevOps is such a big umbrella, right? You could be sales ops, CX ops, marketing ops. And part of that, like, decision has to be like where you see the sales motion starting. Is it going to be more like nurture campaign focus, or is it just going to be like pure email numbers, right? Like, and that's definitely who you're selling into. But to your point, Clay has done so. I love Clay. We have a very good relationship with Clay. They've done a great job opening the door to let a lot of people get more involved, get more technical. But I think when you start looking at like on a leadership perspective, you need people that have that traditional SaaS background to understand what it's like to build out an inbound motion, an outbound motion, the gotchas. And then on top of that, hopefully you have someone that has that traditional ops background, but has also been building on the side for the last few years before like the whole AI blow up over the last, 5 coding 2 years. That gets, that has understanding of like scalability and security. I would say that also anyone could build at this point, but scalability is such a critical piece. But when I join interviews, because it's typically the promotions, I come from like a fractional standpoint. I'm going to help build up the systems, keep track of everything I'm working on, have the documentation ready, and then, help during the interview process to hand everything off. I'm looking for someone that's done the RevOps, that's been in the weeds. So like leadership is great from a RevOps perspective, but I love working with someone that's, been up until 3 a.m. smashing their head trying to work with Salesforce Flow Builder, or has been in the nitty gritty of just like pure unit testing for enrichment of data. Those are the people that really get it and understand the like potential wins of AI and also some of the gaps that may come up.
You basically just did a, salesmanship, advertisement for all the companies that you're touching right now. If you're an ops, those are going to be very great companies to go work for, because you just mentioned like building for scale right off the bat, even in those like seed and A stage. So I mean, this is where Andy made the joke earlier, where some of these companies we've come into, or a little bit later than that, which you pretty much have to retool from scratch because it was not built with the sense of scalability in mind. It was meant to solve point solutions. The challenge of that, and this is where Andy's question was like, who's driving that strategy to get to scalability? And so when you're getting involved in some of these organizations, where do they see that role of ops, and then where does the role of that GTM engineer sit within these companies? Does it really vary, or are you seeing a trend where it's like, well, it's really been sitting because it's founder led, it's been sitting under the founder, and that's how it's driving? Or are they building out more of that operational rigor to build that scale and to diversify the folks that are engaged in that build?
Yeah, I love that question. I definitely say it's the latter. Like the teams that I'm working with, they're very ops heavy. They're
Yeah.
leaning into it, and the folks I most often work with are like the VP of ops. And then traditionally, like I'll get looped in with the sales team as well. Like I come from like trying to be a product marketer, right? Or sorry, product manager. Of like I want to speak to the end user. I always want to interview them. Ultimately, though, like for me personally, when I'm like consulting, I try to wedge myself in between whoever's running the go-to-market motion and the engineering team. Like when we're able to get like that relationship in a good spot, it's like it's off to the races. Like when I was working in RevOps, I always went out of my way to try to really position myself as someone that understands what the engineering team is doing, but also help them understand like what the value is. Like give me access to our Snowflake because I know there's some really interesting data I could be writing queries on to like run our product-led growth outbound motion on.
It was my first call when I joined, Carta and Culture Amp. I remember when I joined Culture Amp, everyone's like, "You're never gonna get product data in CRM." I'm like, "Just let me reach out to the CTOs." We had 2 great chats, 2 great coffees, and we architected out how they would fit, and boom, it was done in a month, and everyone's jaws just dropped, and it's
Yeah.
like, I do believe the data and the systems, the data and is always lives within the product side, so if you wanna be able to get the product data within your GTM motion, you've gotta make that relationship early, which is really
Yeah,
critical.
I really try to wear both hats. I was not the best salesperson. I definitely was not the best developer, but I can understand, their positions, their focus, the ways that they could come together. And when it's just been the case that with the portfolios I'm working with, it's been very easy to do that. I think everyone's just very aligned, even with the larger size companies I'm working with. Um, there's just like a way that I think you could position it where everyone feels like they're taking part of it. I don't think many developers are like, leave me alone. I don't want to help the company. I think people want to, they just have their day job. And when you have someone that like could blend and bring those both together, it's pretty nuts where you're able to get built out. So like, there's a lot going on with like the single player, like building your and writing your own scripts on cron jobs. Those are really cool to like test things out. But like when you start looking at like how do you build a multiplayer play, it has to be a really cross-functional play of engineering, security, ops, sales. So like I try to get that built from the early stages and, sometimes the plays are pretty simple, but just getting folks involved, getting the wins, getting the momentum is just, it's such a huge, important piece to it.
Joe, one question. Um, can I, for my first RevOps GTM engineer hire, go hire a really high slope 23-year-old that's really good at AI?
I feel like you're going to make some enemies for me. I don't think so.
Neither
No,
do I, but I needed to get it on record for sure.
no. I
Why
think
not?
I think those folks are hungry and they wanna learn, and I've worked with some of those people, so, like,
Mhm.
it's been an awesome experience, and they're the ones, I have kids at home, I'm trying to, like, read Twitter and Reddit on the train ride home, but those are the people that are actively reading what's hot right now, what's working, what's not working. I think those are a great asset, and I love to try to bring those people in through, like, a consulting mix first, so, like, a fractional hire, but you need someone that could think about systems as a whole, that could think about sales strategy. I I I I I've even when I worked in RevOps, like pure RevOps, I always differentiated myself because I came from sales. So like I may not be able to build, the perfect report for you, but I could definitely stand up the systems to run the actual sales motion and get deals, meetings booked, deals closed. So I lean into like my background, and I think folks need that background where they get their teeth cut. They understand a lot of the losses. I learned a lot more like what not to do over the years of being an IC than what actually works, and those not what caused the fire drills, what causes issues. Those are the most important learnings, right?
The
The
context, right? It's the
yeah,
context. You don't have
yeah,
that. You don't know what you're building for, and you're kind of in isolation.
Yeah, but when you could do both at the same time, when you could bring in that hungry 23-year-old that's like playing with N8N and Clay and give them a little bit more direction, it's pretty it's a pretty amazing lift to get that person because they want to dive in. And to me, like most of my day is heads down, like in the data, in the workflow. So like not much has changed in that regards, but having someone that has extra time outside of like the work hours to understand like what's out there, that's that's huge.
I agree. You want those people on the team. I just think I'm seeing a lot of companies think that that can be their first hire, right? I think that's like that's a phenomenal number 2 or number 3, and and eventually your entire team will have that skill set. But it's like you need to understand the objects, the systems, the integrations, the vendor things. As you said, it was kind of like systems and the and the go to market strategy side, which is going to help you avoid a ton of mistakes.
And also just like executive communication. Like no
Mhm.
one's gonna want to hear, a whole spiel about what you're working on. They're gonna want to know like the quick, like what are you looking to build and what's it gonna do?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's also not to hate, but like I'm finding a lot of the 23-year-olds are people that were like BDRs that have like their background's BDR, so they're gonna gravitate towards one singular function, which is generate meetings. And
Ugh.
that could burn your ICP if you're doing too much email activity. It's the blessing, the curse of like the clay tooling out there, and all those tools now like Lemlist and whatnot.
Yeah, it's not can you do it, it's should you do it, and that's you got to know the balance. Yeah. So on the companies that you work with, there's been this education for the last couple of years. Clay has been a big advocate in this market of this idea around how do you harness AI within the companies. Are you seeing a shift or a learned experience in companies now than maybe even just a year ago with their evolution of what they really understand to be reality versus the myth of saying we're just going to build everything out in AI. We're like we got or like no, like to your earlier the beginning point. There's foundational things you can't ignore. Do you feel like people's experience and understanding is a little bit more seasoned, even most last 6 to 12 months?
I love that question. It was like, oh, we're gonna build the AI SDR, and we're just gonna
Yeah.
turn it on, and it's gonna generate meetings. But like, guess what? It was just slop, and like nothing good came from it. I know there are a few companies now that are kind of coming with a better approach, but like that just spoke to it. Like you can't just there's an artistry to sales, even like just pure top of funnel, and like the best BDRs are thoughtful about how they're reaching out, even if it's at scale. That just like let's lean into AI to do it. Was a complete miss. Like even when we're working on generating outbound at scale here, and I'm involved with it with the team, like we are like really in the thick of it. It takes weeks to stand up context documents, so much iteration and testing just to get the copy like in a good spot. Just to assume that an agent could do that,
Yeah.
it's pretty insane.
You mentioned that because a lot of the companies, early stage companies, are moving from founder mode to more manager mode and beyond. That prospecting ICP is like top of funnel. Getting more pipeline is oftentimes a very first good place to start. Um, how much time are our organizations spending now more like mid-cycle? So how do we convert those deals better? How do we understand if that pipeline's moving as it should,
Yeah.
or even going to the post sales? But like, if that's the first step, what are the next things that people are then tackling after they have kind of addressed the we need more from the top of the pipeline?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think that's where part of like the RevOps hat comes into play, having that past experience, because there are certain insights and reports I've learned that really stand out. And they're not just like we're reporting for the sake of reporting, but we're building these reports to really try to understand what's working, what's not. One of like the most common plays that I've found is like looking at from closed law, like from stage 1 or 2 to close lost. I'm looking at that threshold of like 60% of our deals have gone from stage 1 to close lost. Why? What is happening there, right? And there's like that's a whole conversation. The sales coaching needed, it's better qualification needed. Like if you have the data to really help support that, that's a game changer. So one of the tools, obviously a lot of people come to us like looking for recommendations on what tools to use. Attention.com is one I'm very behind on, but like just became familiar with or implementing it right now. I think it's a game changer. It's very like they do a lot, but like the one thing I've been looking for a long time, and it's the whole build versus buy, um, is like I need good data in the CRM so we can start building insights, right? I want to know this deal, you know, was stage 1, now it's closed loss. What happened, right? Was it not qualified correctly? Was a certain question not asked? getting that data in is huge. So like I'm very focused on like streamlining the sales process when we're talking about like shifting to middle funnel, bottom funnel, streamlining the seller's process so they could actually be strategic advisors and not be admins, right? There's always going to be that element. But one of the like the gotchas I always found with like the tooling out there and why I finally came across attention is that like with a lot of AI, it's a black box. And just from being a former seller, like in RevOps, like, you know what, there's not always going to be a deal that's open. Sometimes it slips through. Maybe there's 2 or 3 deals open to one account. I would ask different tooling, like, what happens when there are 2 or 3 deals open? Where are you going to push the data? How do you incorporate
That was
human in
always
the
the
loop?
break. That was why those always failed over like 10 years.
Right. Exactly. And like, that's like, and some enterprise motions are selling to the farmer. Like one of our portcos has 8 opportunities at any given time with different teams. And being able to like accurately understand, like, this is the sales motion. Can you support it? Attention did that. And I'm really excited to implement it. And we're going to be launching in a week or two. There's just so much data that we could be collecting now from an agentic standpoint. And like for me, AI is very much like augmenting or adding to the process. And then now we can start doing the whole reporting piece. So middle of funnel, I'm just super stoked to start collecting that data I've always wanted and constantly had to nag AEs to do. And,
Yeah, it's another guest. We asked them what's their best tip for with AI, and they basically said reps should no longer enter data. And if you think about that as a RevOps person, we no longer need to chase those people. We no longer need to optimize the systems for people, and we have that data, and so we can do it.
yeah, and I've tried everything. I tried gamifying it. There's only so much you can do. I'm also a seller, and guess what? Like, I've closed big deals. I'm very proud of some of the deals I closed, but I've also been put on a PIP. And like, I don't care about your data and your reports if I'm trying to like, make money, keep my job and whatnot. So like, I try to understand both sides. And finally, it seems like we're going to be in a spot where like, most of it can be automated from a data extraction point.
I would love to talk about the multiplayer mode for that,
Yeah.
right? I think there's 2 genres. One is the give every rep AI and see what flowers bloom. I think we've all learned, or if you haven't learned yet, that's a freaking disaster. I think the other one is actually the hard one, right? Which is do it centrally, multiplayer, build one platform that you can use there. I'd be curious maybe to dive a little deeper, like how would you guide a company to get to that multiplayer mode? And by multiplayer, I guess I mean like anybody in the team can build agents on top of it and that
Yeah.
side of things.
I'm a big believer in crawl, walk, run, and it's always
Yeah.
annoying to say, but like, you got to start with step one. And, there's a lot of excitement around like Obsidian and Cloud Frame. But when you look at that, it's very much single player. There's no way of like being able to push that out in a way that scales across a 10-person team, a 150-person team. So and this is something that's been very top of mind and candidly something I just finally been starting to be able to dive into the last 4 or 5 weeks is like, how do you go multiplayer with some of these hotter trends that are out there?
Yeah.
For me, it's going back to the RevOps basics of like systems and like, you know, databases. So like if I want to build out the right brain, I need to have structured data. And structured data is, there's a lot of thought that could go into like the best approach. We could also start with step one, which is we need accounts and we need contacts. So when I'm starting to pitch this with internally with different teams, and we're even like looking to leverage this internally, it's what is the bare minimum that we could start building, iterating on, and have the team universally use, right? Truly go multiplayer. So like for accounts, like not every single company, right? But a lot of companies are selling into enterprise, and you know what? We need companies, we need contacts. A lot of those people are on LinkedIn. A lot of those people are posting. So now you have 4 different objects, right, that have different relationships, right? And there's so many easy ways of extracting that data now through Appify, where you could scrape someone's LinkedIn profile, you could scrape their posts, you could do it on a recurring job. Something as simple as Supabase, which is free to start, right? You could write some basic ed functions, you could leverage trigger dev, you could, you don't even have to be that technical. You could work with Claude, especially through MCP, if you connect Supabase to be your building buddy, right? So like when I'm pushing this idea of going multiplayer, it's very much like, how do we enable the sellers to start their like outreach in a thoughtful way? That's like V1, like what's like the lowest hanging fruit that we could build a solid step one with. And that's where we're focused right now. And then as you iterate, we look to bring in additional objects. One of the portcos I'm working with, they're selling to pharma. So we're looking for research papers,
Yep.
right? So now we have an additional object, LinkedIn posts, research papers, companies, contacts. Pharma, a lot of people are on LinkedIn. They're sharing their thoughts a lot. So you start looking to remove yourself from the constraints of a CRM. That's like another value add, and just be like, hey, I'm focused on top of funnel. We're not looking to put any proprietary data in the system. What does the V1 look like? And it catches fire these last few weeks. It's been really exciting. And you could just easily chat with it through MCP, and you could make Claude your home. You know, it's pretty nuts to make Claude Code or Claude Coworker, actually, I'd say more so for the AEs, a home. And it gives them the opportunity to get a sense of the data, to build out their own skills. And then you take, the unified set of skills, unified set of context documents, and you bring that to the overall mass.
So
So
what's the platform? I know we talked about you. Yes, everyone needs a CRM. I think we still agree on that. But what are you giving reps? Like, what is the tool that the rep? Because the reps aren't going to auth into every single. So say you built something amazing in an agent, but then you wanted to give it to 100 reps. Like, how do you give that to them? How do you deliver that to them? What system are the reps using and accessing and interfacing with the tooling that you're building?
candidly, I don't have the answer yet for the 100-person rep. So like one of the companies we were working with had 150 sales reps. We used a Chrome extension, safely built and it worked out great because I got to work with their systems team, their info team, and they're the ones that spearheaded it. And we're leveraging some really helpful data from Salesforce, from Google Cloud, uh, and also from Parallel. So the extension was like the first play into going enterprise multiplayer, and it would learn. It was some pretty cool things. The 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 Supabase play, I'm starting off with small teams first, candidly. So like 3 or 4 person sales team. From an orchestration standpoint, like I don't even know what the right answer is. Like where we lean into to actually, like, if we felt comfortable doing this, does it live in Claude Cowork and everyone has access to it? Or is there an actual like system put in place to like handle the orchestration? I don't have a clear cut answer right now. There's a lot of tools out there. There's LangGraph, there's Crew AI. How technical do you go? When do you actually like go build to buy? That's I've always pre-vibe coding believed like we got to build first to understand the gaps, to understand the nuance. So if we decide to go and procure a new tool, it's not just the seller giving us the demo and the spiel. We could actually like double click into the gotchas. But I don't know right now. I'm excited to see what happens. There's a lot of movement with Cloudflare, with Amazon Bedrock, but those are much more like technical leanings tools and systems.
I think it's right. I mean, we had that, what was it, Scratchpad at one point, where it was like in the Chrome extension, it could pull
Update
everything from you.
Salesforce. Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know what's next from a rep UX standpoint, right? Like Salesforce talks about headless CRM. Well, what's the head? That'll be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know people love Slack, and there's some great tools. I
Mm.
think Dust is very heavy on Slack, but like when we build within Slack and we have like a few agentic plays, especially for like our smaller size, we also incubate primary. So there's a few companies that are in house that we're working with that are like AI pilled, if you will, that are really building out advanced workflows and agents. It's still single player, but it's very impressive to see what's built out. But when it's getting pushed into Slack, it just becomes the same problem of like having too many tasks in Salesforce. There's no way, even if there's an action, right? Everything's MCP now. Lemlist, Mixmax, all these tools are now accessible. But if you have 100 messages, like the seller's going to be overwhelmed. So
I remember the days of Troops, right? Troops was the original, like, you get it, and you can fire an alert off of a Salesforce change. So we felt like freaking geniuses for the first week.
yeah,
But then the reps started to ignore the alerts. The first time someone saw one of those things, like, whoa, this is cool. But after you see the 75th alert in one day and you're like, you start to tune them out, you have that same problem. So I
yeah.
agree.
Right now, I'm leaning into like artifacts. So like, there's this idea like within Cloud Cowork that I have like building out artifacts that are supported by projects, and basically since it's Supabase, you could just run, different queries. It's natural language. The rep could ask questions, but there's a way of just grabbing that, trying to minimize token usage and just plug it into a specific SQL query.
Huh.
That's what's getting me excited. So you enable the rep to get thoughtful with the questions they're asking, especially when you start bringing in like, who just recently posted on LinkedIn about this clinical trial or this new drug release, right? So they could leverage natural language, and there's tools out there like Supabase MCP. There's tools out there that could help with semantic search that could really give them the power at their fingertips to write some like thoughtful searches. But right now it's just more so like, you could write your searches. We could also run queries every day, but it's meant to be, here are 10 people to reach out to, not like 100 people. Like, it's just really meant to be like, you have 30 minutes on your calendar a day, like every day. Let's maximize it with some like thoughtful outreach and content.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Question on the so go to market engineer versus engineering, because there's the build before you buy, then you can buy, and then you can experiment, and then you need to maintain and maintain it for a long period of time. And with engineering organizations wanting to build out their AI capabilities, oftentimes they're building technologies that are now bridging into capturing signals for product to understand what customers are using. Well, those are the same things we might want to reposition and actually use for the go to market team. So you have this element of like, do you build and test and try? Does engineering become the hub where things become maintained, almost as if you're building a new product? Then it goes to like the product team and they maintain it. Do you encounter that where you have the go-to-market engineering team, which is oftentimes enveloped within the go-to-market organization, then an engineering team, in the back office doing it as well, and how they're coordinating and working together? Does that come up?
I that's one of the main reasons I'm pushing for, the cross-functional
Good.
play. Like, one, also, like, ask people what observability means, and, like, from the vibe coding, sir, no one's gonna be able to tell you what that
Right.
is, right? And that's the problem, is that when your project fails or if it becomes too much spaghetti code, who's gonna fix it? Like, having the engineering team involved, and honestly, I would say, like, I try to get buy-in, right? Because, one, they know better than I do. That's just a fact. We're always going to know better about scalability and how this actually is used in the best way possible. So just leaning into the cross collaboration early on. But yes, to answer your question, like, these internal tools that eventually get built out, unless they're really built out within, like, I still lean into like Zapier,
Right.
right? Like, because I have access to observability, I don't need to worry about infrastructure. I could build a simple flow. If something fails, guess what? We're gonna get an email.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like the vibe coding and trying to productize that, like, yeah, I wouldn't personally ever feel comfortable being like, okay, it's push production. Let's go, guys. It's too much.
Do you have a framework on buy versus build, Joe?
Uh, I like I feel like people don't like to do this. I like to take sales calls, like, as soon as I'm interested in something. It's a seller's job to sell. That doesn't mean I have to buy, doesn't mean I have to make decision. So I like to do my due diligence first. I like to know what's out there first. I like to know what's capable, what's possible, and what I feel like, hey, I could actually build out a solid V1 of this, you know. And I think I indirectly did that with like attention, where, hey, we use Granola. I could set up Zapier. I could get this working. But, you get into the nuance, and this is why it's so important to get into the nuance. Well, like, what happens again if there's two opportunities and we can't tell from the transcript exactly which opportunity the data should be pushed to? How do we incorporate human in the loop? So, like, I really like to try to do as quick and as deep research as I can. So really trying to do as quickly as possible, trying to go as deep as possible as well to get a sense of what a V1 looks like. Is that V1 doable to build out? If not, like, shit, like, I hate bringing on tools. I worked in implementation. I hated when people would like bring us on, and after the first like implementation meeting, we're like, well, sorry, our Salesforce integration actually doesn't support formula fields. Like, it's just the worst. It's the worst feeling for every party involved, and it just kills momentum for the project we're trying to work on. So build versus buy. Try to build first, but I also know I'm not a developer, and I also know, like, sometimes ROI is not there. My time could be spent better, better else. Like, you know, do I want to build Chili Piper out? No. Chili Piper is a great tool. It's their pricing is direct and transparent, and it works and it scales. Why not just bring on Chili Pepper and shift to the next focus, right? That's kind of my approach.
I
Yeah.
think you're right on a lot of this stuff. It's so your impression changed on attention, right? You're like, I could build this with pipelines, but in the end, you're like, but should I? Is another
Right.
question.
I mean, I could build a V1 and it's not going to be the most scalable. And like, that's just one component to what they're doing. They did that like a year, 2 years ago, and they've added so much more functionality to it. But again, like, I'd rather learn about the gotchas. I would not know, like, even though I work with sales and it's obvious two opportunities or no opportunities created because the seller forgot to do it. I just wouldn't think that through until I actually got my hands dirty and built it. But as soon as I saw that, I'm like, Sure, I could build a whole Slack system with Zapier and all like, but it just wouldn't be the right approach. I want
Yes.
scalability and like the fact of the matter is like people forget about things, and that's the goal with RevOps and go-to-market engineering. You want them to forget about it. You want it in the background. If they do think about it later on, it's probably because it broke, not because like they want to congratulate you again on the great system you built out like 3, 6 months ago, etc.
No, you've got to have all those scars. And I mean, Andy's the same way where we all grew up having to do it. And if you've been doing this for a decade, you started out really getting into the data, making sure that you understood exactly what was underpinning because you were accountable for what it was, what the results were. So there was always this element of like making sure that you could go there, and then you have the scars to show for it, and all those weird nuances like the multi opportunity deals. That's funny. Are there any? So this is something where I get caught up in my biases sometimes, and this is why I love the go-to-market council because we test each other's limits and perspectives. Were there any, or have there been any truths that you've believed in for a good portion of your career that are now thrown out the window now that you're into this the space where you're like, oh, it's like my perspective is completely changed 180. Any
I
epiphanies like that?
think I have a decent answer. I I really when I was working in sales, so I'd have like a forward deployment approach to sales. Like when I was selling to Domino's, I was at a company called Movable Ink, and it's like real time email content at the moment of open. And I found like Domino's public API, and I prospected into Domino's, showing like, hey, when you open this email up, it's going to look at your geolocation, show you the nearest Domino's in this content block. You know, that still took 6 months of hyper personalization, cold calling them, etcetera, but I eventually got them on to meet with me because it was just so personalized. I I've kinda lost some faith in depersonalization. I think, like, I'm not, like, part of, like, the email expert outbound posse, but, like, I do follow a lot of them, and I agree with what they're saying, which is, like, it's better to just segment a little higher up and personalize based off of that instead of going so deep. We've ran some, like, insanely hyper personalized emails for a few portcos, and I think it's valuable, but it's more it's advertising now, maybe a little bit of education, and then we'd run, like, a LinkedIn automation play, founder-led, "Hey, are you going to the Gartner campaign Gartner event?" And boom, that's it. No personalization, response, and meeting book. So, it's a bummer that, like, depersonalization and A is taking the time to do that isn't there, but they could spend time elsewhere to, further down the funnel, going back to your question, right?
Yeah.
So, the
Yeah.
depersonalization it's a little sad,
Well,
but,
it's not quite like the spam bot campaigns of yesteryear where every A became a spammer with their sequencing tool. But there is an element there. I think my for me personally, my I've always been the advocate of I think first of all and foremost, this hasn't changed, but A's need to own their own pipeline fundamentally. But the idea that prospecting may not actually be the best path where maybe we can do the prospecting on their behalf, and now they're just focusing. We've had some great calls like this previously where the reps are now just having live conversations. It's more inbound warm touch leads, and I'm like, that is such a much better concept, but now that's possible because we can
yep,
run personalized campaigns at scale. And I'm like, okay, so that was my epiphany. Like, being the rep that's always prospecting, maybe that used to be what you could do, but now there's a better way or better route to get to that number. And maybe marketing ultimately owns the 100% of the pipeline because
totally.
you
I
don't
love that.
need to spend time doing that. So that's kind of that was the epiphany I had was like, oh yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's something we weren't able to do, a year or two ago.
That's dead on. I mean, there's tools like Ample Market, that are just doing some really impressive outreach. It's just like, you trade off. You're abstracting the need to get involved and to that level of nuance, put together the lists and what the personalization looks like. But what they're sending out is great. It's sequenced emails, it's multi-channel. But yeah, to your point, it
I
gives you
literally have them up on my browser. It's so funny you said that. Like, it's like,
really it's impressive. Like it's and there's some other tools out there that are doing stuff similar. So again, do I want to build that out? Well, we kind of did. And the ROI was okay. And again, like I could help further down the funnel once that like leaning into like, hey, maybe marketing owns it to your point, but we should do everything we can to make sure you go into that first call blowing them away. Right. All the research and not just like when AI first got introduced to go to market, it's like we could do deep research. No, you got to like really think it through and lean into like what are the signals that we're looking for at the company level, at the person level. Like personally, I don't, if someone reaches out to me and I get on the phone with them, I don't care if they did AI research or not, as long as they put in the time to digest it and formulate the story, like Thank you. I'm
and
impressed.
have a discovery conversation, have a normal conversation, listen, and like actually be
Yeah.
intrigued and engaged. Like again, it's not rocket science. This stuff is just, it's like the fundamentals of like
Yeah.
just ask
Well,
questions.
relationships are more important
Yeah.
than ever with AI selling, I'd
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does this world, I mean, I feel like we kind of are going to fumble through the next 2 years of systems change where we get to like a modern data, a modern CRM, all the data signals being put in and agents built on top of this. So I feel like while the future of the next 2 to 3 years is going to be ugly and messy and we're going to be tripping over each other, at least we know where we're headed. Like, what else could we be doing with AI that we haven't, that people aren't thinking about yet, Joe? Like, what are some of the innovations you're starting to see and push the bounds on?
Let me know if I'm answering this like
Any answer any way you want is
right.
a fun
I'm
way. Yeah.
I'm looking like I'm getting excited just given my background with like customer success, being at Catalyst, working CS ops, building out health scores. I haven't seen a ton in that space. Outs like, obviously support, like, that's a quick one, but, like, incorporating I think Gainsight's trying to do this. I'm not involved, I'm not in their platform at all ever, but seeing how it gets across the sales journey now into the customer journey. There's so much data that could be collected, right? And there's so much inference you could be making on like the customer health, the sentiment, the expansion opportunity, the churn opportunity. Like Carta did an incredible job, like trying to leverage these data points. They didn't just have a health score; they had an expansion score and a churn score, right? But imagine powering that with like data points from across the board and having like that agentic play. That's what gets me excited.
No, I like that. I feel like the odds of the CS side being no, the CSM slash expansion side being built are much higher than bought to me because everybody has a unique data set, has a unique motion. I feel like sales and marketing are I'm more likely to buy, and CS I'm more likely to build.
That was one of the biggest learnings that everyone would bring on Catalyst, which is a customer success platform. They think, oh, let's just use the templates everyone else is using. No, that's not the case. Every single team is ramped a little bit differently and has to be because of the business, the value prop, the story. And that was one of the most challenging things is like, hey, here's this template you should be using for taking calls. That just didn't vibe with one customer and it did with the other. So being able to open that door for CSMs, I mean, CSMs, I think 2 or 3 years ago, there was like a report release of like the 20 jobs with the highest turnover. And the only tech job that was on that was a
Oof.
CSM. And it's a brutal role, but it's just as important in sales, if not more important. Like, yes, sales closes the deal, but like when it comes to expansion, NRR, like CSMs are the ones that are driving that. But they're so busy doing so much admin work and
Yeah.
support work, and yeah, it's terrible. But to be able to streamline that, that's what I'm excited to see. What some folks are doing, and there's a couple people in the CS space that I know that are very technical, and they're starting to do some of that work. So I'm trying to follow along with what they're doing. But again, going back to like the tooling, like I think that's like a true orchestration play where you need like multiple agents to be able to talk to each other and pass data and daisy chain data. Like that's where it gets really interesting. But to your point, Andy, like sales can be to some degree templatized, and that's why you have how many like if you go on AI, if you go on X or Twitter, you could see how many sales agencies or LinkedIn are pushing the same content,
Yeah.
but you don't see many CS agencies because it's brutal. It's really tough. You have to have domain expertise. You can't like watch a couple YouTube videos and just pick it up. So I'm particularly excited about that
Yeah,
play.
and success is much murkier in CS, right? Like you can, despite the fact that it's called customer success, like you knowing, did I do a good job today is a lot harder in CS because if that person's happy, they may not say it. It may not show up.
Mhm.
They may be the happiest person in the world, but they still may get merged and churned, right?
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
it's like, and so data becomes like fuzzier in CS as well too.
Yeah. And I'm a, like, that's exact use case. So like we always tried running is like, did our champion leave? Right. If our champion left, there's a huge opportunity for us to get, dropped. And we saw it happen over and over, but we were always on our back foot because there was no like automation to like just constantly check several years ago, constantly check their LinkedIn once a month. Yeah, totally.
CS has always been kind of the stepchild in this whole, I mean, they had Tatango and Gainsight was really the only one for such a long time. And now they're like Cora and Actively, and a few of these other things are coming out there, which are really interesting. But yeah, it's your customer base. It's the impossible job of customer success and how do you evolve and how do you drive value. it's an impossible role, an impossible job. But I think now it's your opportunity for growing. Cross sell and upsell are so critical, and churn, NDR, NRR are kind of the top metrics these days. So they're finally getting their due, I think.
Yeah, and there's some interesting tools out there like Pylon, which I played around a bit when I was consulting prior to
Yeah.
primary. Like, they're leaning into the space because they're focused on obviously going against Zendesk, but they're also leaning into the customer success space. And it's just really interesting because that's we talk about signals on the sales side, there's, LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. But like talk about customer success side. Like one of the underlying signals that we always struggled with at Catalyst and all our customers did was like merging support data into house score, right? So they're focused on getting all the support stuff and then incorporating customer success as well. That's one of the companies I'm actually I'm trying to watch as much as possible because it seems like they're trying to solve that problem.
This was awesome, Joe. Like, I feel like the number of insights you have across a giant portfolio
Yeah.
and the stage you're playing at is a really fun one because you get
Yeah.
to meet companies before they've made a lot of mistakes. Thank you for sharing, taking the time today, and excited to share these with the world.
Thank you guys. A lot of fun.